Hallo.
Hello.
Ich freue mich heute hier zu sein.
Happy to be here,
Und
and
möchte in der nächsten
I want to talk
ein
in
bisschen
the next hour.
diskutieren.
I want to ask you a question and discuss with you, think with you, the question that
Besonders tangiert. Die Frage,
tangates our generation.
wer
The question is,
endet wen?
who is programming whom?
Zuerst ein Bild, was
Want to start with a
nichts damit zu
picture
tun
that
hat. Ich bin von
doesn't have to do anything to do with that on the first sight. This is one of the last pictures of the Cassini mission. I hope you can see it, you in the back can see it. If you have a look at this, you see the rings of Saturn in the top of the picture. This mission was really great. If you look exactly, you see there's some points, and there's this one point that's a bit brighter. It's here,
Und genau das.
and exactly that is the Republica, that's we.
Das Interessante ist,
The interesting thing on this point is it's an exception in this universe.
es ist so, dass wir
Until now, we don't know
bei denen
any similar points in that on that through evolution the same thing came out as here, intelligent life.
Und genau da
And
ein bisschen, denn wenn man sich die
that's the
Evolution
topic
auf
of
Planeten
today.
anschaut,
If you see the evolution on this planet, 4.5 billion years, this evolution was not linear. There were
es gab sogar
gaps
Fehlschläge, also
and there were failures.
Modelle,
There were models that are outdated, like you would say today. Take a shovel and dig a bit, you will find things like that. They are not existing anymore today, but that shows that we have some kind of dynamic of change on this planet in the past. And if you look at this more detailed, there have been hotspots with massive change, changes caused by climate change, external meteorites that impacted with Earth, and every time then the number of species really declined dramatically, and the life on our planet got a reset and restarted. And the interesting question is, where are we today? Next to the 5 known large crises this planet had, is there a new change? And this new change is maybe that it's not biology but machines that start to shape the life on this planet. And today it is actually so that we shaped this planet. One speaks from Anthropocene. And I read recently that if you look at the animals with a spine on this planet, only 3% of these animals are just species that not have been shaped by humans. And there's just very little that's real nature and not shaped by human. And the question is, how will this proceed in the future? If we talk about change, technical change, it exists already, and it has been existed in the past. Let's take the city of Berlin. The city of Berlin was the first that started with electric light on the street lights. And Leipziger Straße was the first. And the interesting thing is, it took very long, 50 years after the electrification of the Leipziger Straße, 20% of Berlin households had no electric energy. And there's a very slow evolution of technology, and a generation had the chance to adapt to that. What we see today, and that you can see in the background here, maybe we can lower the light on the stage a bit. This is our planet, and I grew up in India, and the India of my childhood, South India, Bangalore, was very dark. In India there hasn't been a lot electrical life back then. If you look at it genetically, there's very little lack of sight in the night. Who was not able to see at night was eaten by tigers. But what happened within very few decades, and I came back from the very dark India to Europe. If you look at the planet during the nighttime, you see it really lights. It's lit, and the large industrial nations are glowing, and North America, USA, and even India is lit right now. And Astro Alex, who's going to be on the ISS soon, you can see South Korea, but North Korea is not lit. So there are more two qualities. We have an evolution that's global right now, and it became global, and that's a new quality for us. The new things are not coming from here. And the second thing is we have a global development, and if you nearly global, if you see have a look at some countries at Northern Africa or in Southern America, you see it's really slow there, but we are talking about something that's global, and we are talking about that it's very fast. Just two numbers. The phone with a dial took 75 years until it had 100 million users. And today, it's faster. Facebook 4.4 years, WhatsApp 2.3 years. The scale of time is really getting shorter and shorter. So within a few decades, it's becoming a standard. So if we talk about developments today, there's a new quality because we can't think about it in a long time like the past generations. So what's about equality? Very simple, technological advance. Simple example, my mobile phone. I skip a model, and my current model has 226 gigabytes of storage space. And I'm a physicist, and in my time I worked with large computers. And if you can see it in the background of this picture, you can see the PC lab of my study times. And what you see there, these chunks of hardware are storage spaces, and with 200. Every one of you has in his pocket has way more storage capacity than the computer center of my study times. And it's not even the capacity, but it's also the speed of that's increasing dramatically. So in the 80s, I was working at the Jülich lab, and for a short time I was managing to hold up a record of high-speed computing with a Cray XMP. If you see at the picture on the left, that's me. My wife always said I didn't look very good there, and I think she's right. And XMP back then, $15 million, and I reached 200 megaflops, 200 million floating point operations per second, and that was really crazy back then. This was just one of these in Europe. ECL 140 kilowatts of heat were produced, and wow, I was really proud of that. Today, with less than $2,000, you can buy a PC that has 200 million megaflops, so it has more computing power than all of the supercomputers of my study time combined. So that's the future of technology. And on the desktop, more power, in the pocket, more storage capacity. That's what drives us, and that shows. Well, that shows the qualities. We all notice that because of this advance makes that in the next 10 years we have very powerful computers we have always with us. If you think about it, the watch was the first machine we always wore at the body. The watch as the driver of the revolution. It was replaced by the smartphone now, and the smartphone causes change already. changed. You all know, a simple example, you all know Uber or My Taxi platforms that do something, and that's very simple, or that's very proud, disruptive technology. What means that you need to think about cut everything away that's really annoying, and then you have a disruptive technology. Think about you want to reach a train in Berlin, you order a taxi. In Cologne, it's like you call the taxi central, and they say, yeah, we are sending a taxi, but there's no taxi coming, and the train is leaving. Then you call again, and it's line is busy. Then try again, and then someone picks up, and it's like, he's there in a minute, and well, then the car arrives. You jump in there, and depending on the city you're in. You don't believe what strange ways the taxi can go. But if you drop out, you need to pay, and you get a receipt. And I worked at the WDR, the public television of. Yeah, if you in New York,
For New York taxi, if you want a receipt from a New York taxi, and then you bring it back to our German jobs, then they will be like, no. So everything's been taken over by the digital, and this is okay. This is almost okay. Everything is happening globally. Like last year, I was again in India, and for example, this is Ola for auto rickshaws. So all the romantic part of the auto rickshaw is being taken away. So technology is changing processes. This is trivial. Technology is always also changing us. For example, you know this image about the Pope 2005. There's no smartphone, so it's like we are Pope. And then 8 years later, same place, and it looks like this. And you can ask yourself, is the smartphone a type of prayer of a new culture? Sometimes I think that way. That's about the selfie mania, how you use your phone. Selfie mania is also a global phenomenon, by the way. This one is happening in Beijing, and in the background is Mao. I don't know what he's saying about this, but regardless where you are, you realize that within 10 or 11 years, worldwide, there's a new grammar. Worldwide. Regardless in which city you are, if you see young people, they sit like this, like headphones in their ear, looking at the screen. Sometimes, one day I will make a book just about selfie mania. This is not Cologne. That's the only thing I can say. The Cologne subway looks different. Digitalization leads us to a change in ourselves, in processes, and also this, pretty easy, the change from vinyl to digital discs. That was just the first chapter of digitalization, because later producers could say, I change the machines that create the discs, because it's just creating different disks. But the change of the digitalization really is that it will create a dematerialization of our processes. And that means a lot. That means that border costs for distribution completely are destroyed. And we will really realize this in the next few years. I'm not so hopeful that we will find so many jobs, because so many jobs will just fall away. But let's look at this grammar, who is programming whom. You know that the digitalization, you see that the digitalization is changing the topology. Example, earlier, you could put in, this is various types, is this a teacher and students, is this a broadcasting station and the viewers or listeners, and viewers and listeners implies a certain passivity, and everything, and all this is changing. It's changing radically. Some people are talking about producers and consumers, and we all realize that the grammar is changing. We all experience something where everyone is broadcasting and everyone is producing. And the experience in the media is that single people are so broadcasting so strongly that they are mass media. And we also experience other topics where from this experience the focus onto the product changes to the focus on the process. It sounds abstract, but you can think about it. If you were invited 30 years ago at Doris's house in Cologne, then there would be Rheinian Sauerbraten as food. And so imagine this, you come there, the table is set, but you never enter the kitchen. That was like product-oriented thinking. Like the dinner room was finished, and so at some point the food comes out, but you never enter the kitchen. What's happening today? The architecture of our houses is getting more and more opener. The kitchen are open. Today we invite people to when we haven't even cooked. Today we cook together. These are my friends. This is Hans-Georg, an architecture, photograph, and Wolf. And in the middle is Dieter, the only one who can cook. So, but we have fun together. And this is something that, as a base grammar, maybe also only if this image is maybe a bit simple, but this is translated into so many different topics. Everywhere we experience this change in grammar, we experience something else too. Maybe that goes deeper, and that is that we all are imprinted from something that is maybe even deeply religious. It is about the demand for something up there. What you see here is the Archangel Michael holding the soul scales at the end of the life, and he decides hell or paradise. And this is a deeply anchored thinking in us, which leads us to look for institutions above, always. Someone above us. And this grammar, if you abstract that, then you see in so many just banal things. Like if I want to give money to you, it usually looks like I transfer money to a bank and the bank transfers money to the other. If I want to buy a lot, I have to go to a notary and then it will continue on. But right now what we experience is a paradigm change, or away from these structures of authority towards something else. Like if I was, like the big authority is just vanishing because digitalization is enabling every one of us new technology, like blockchain, for example, which everyone is talking about. Like this leads us that these processes will be changed dramatically over the next 10 and 20 years. I wouldn't want to bet on whether we need still banks. If we can certificate things digitally, we might not need them anymore. It might not be bad. We could use other buildings in the cities. What we see is in many places this reversal of the flow. I want to go into that some more because this is something that in my part of the world, this is very tangential to me. There's other examples. What does it mean? Reversal of the flow. Someone is tweeting and then the TV news is coming and then the newspapers are coming, and this is different. This is very exciting because if I talk to co-workers from TV stations, sometimes I really get the feeling that they haven't got it yet. There's a world that has been upended, and the most exciting thing about this is that this world is influencing our communication, and it's influencing it. And I wanna formulate this thesis that in this grammar, fake news are the result of this changed topology. Fake news are an important topic. A year ago, I had a long interview with a coworker of mine. It was printed. Europe needs its own Facebook last year, and you can always repeat that. But the interesting part of this, just to say, I experienced this. I know what fake news is because Europe needs a new Facebook was transmorphed to Ranga Yogeshwar says no to censorship. And I would have never thought to agree with her. And don't read the small print, but it's just about showing you that we're talking about something that a media grammar also has to be thought about. This is interesting because in this process there have been things have been said that weren't verified by platforms or individuals that are just not verifiable. There's like fake media. If you look at Google News, that just pop up, and there's just like an address in Montevideo and places like this. And at this point, I have to say, like, media is something different than shoe polish cream. And if a society doesn't want to let people take away their media, they should be very, very careful about this. Like, we experience this in different countries, like the US, for example, where it's like a fog of fake news that is just like taking away all the important steps of democracy. And like, we also know this. We go on demonstrations. We do the March of Science, or Pueblo Ondito. Someone is saying ho. Was someone there? Someone was there. Yes, I was also there in Cologne. This year in Cologne, last year in Berlin. We go there. What is important about this? Important is that we, as Democrats, as kids of the Enlightenment, we have to work towards the future, and we have to work towards a society where facts play a role in some kind and are not lost in the fog of illusion. And what we realize right now is that obviously platforms and social networks and Twitter and so on, maybe they are more creating something that is not as correct, which doesn't mean they're evil, which doesn't mean we have to say no to them, but we have to understand the process like concrete. The MIT did a study on Facebook what happened between 2006 and 2017, and they realized that fake or false news, to quote it correctly, spreads 6 times faster to 1,500 users than the truth. And if we look at the fact that there's an economization of the media, where like things that people click on a lot are getting pushed up, then we have a breeding ground for fake news. But no one is standing up and is saying like, oh, people, is us the problem because we are pushing everything this up. But in the long run, this is not good. So we should really change something. And we also see that on Facebook.
Let's talk a bit about programming and human and machines. Let's take the example, the car. It's really important in Germany. You need to talk about cars within, and if 3 men stand together in Germany, 5 minutes later they talk about cars. I grew up in India. In India it's not that way. And if in India 3 men stand together, after 5 minutes they talk about gastric problems. So let's talk about autonomous vehicles. So first, why is that a thing that can make sense? If we look at the traffic, we see traffic kills, and not that little persons, 1.2 million persons per year. And if we manage to have autonomous vehicles and make them en vogue, we can halve the number of victims. So we talk about 600,000 lives per year. Just that, to have a comparison, that's more than people die in the Syriac war. So that's a good motive, and of course some people are working on that, and I say that's maybe a tip for you. If you talk about new technologies, don't read about it, try it out. So I do that all the time. So I had a prototype of Audi VW, and it was an autonomous car. It was great. I went to the Autobahn, 100 kilometers per hour, hands off the wheel, no feet on the gas pedal, and car went and taking over something works most of the time. So let me show you two videos to you. And the first video I created myself. I recorded it. For explanation, I'm holding the camera, and I have a co-worker, Lisa Weitemeyer, and she's driving, and I was holding the camera, and something extraordinary happened. And well, when I took half of my hands off the wheel, it was kind of strange. And okay, Lisa's going on the autonomous mode.
Und irgendwas nebenbei machen. Gar nicht schlecht.
And we need to say on the right side there's some kind of driving instructor. You can't see it.
Das hat jetzt zum Beispiel nicht geklappt.
Okay.
Wenn ich ehrlich bin,
I'm honest. It looks softer than it has been. It was a real hard braking maneuver, and otherwise we had a crash. The driving instructor broke and pushed the brakes. And if you see the car that was causing that was white, and a few months later there was an accident with the Tesla, and also the color was white. And I'm really respect for the technicians. There's not trivial with the sensors all there, and probably there has been a problem with the sensors. So autonomous vehicles, naja. I ask every one of you, please give a hand sign if you want to go home and there's a pool of autonomous vehicles out there. Please raise your hand if you would take one for your way home. I'll show a second video to you now. The second video I didn't record myself. It's a video recorded out of an autonomous car, and I will show it twice, because I think on the first time you don't see everything. But please, yeah, keep in mind it's a perspective out of the vehicle and in the Tesla from the autonomous mode. And please look what happens. Okay, so what you could see clearly, I'm running the video again. Please keep down the lights. Question yourself, if you would have been behind the wheel, would you have braked or not? I watched the video several times, and I would say I wouldn't have pushed the brakes, because the guy in front of us is not braking, and so but the sensors of the vehicle are registering that someone is in front of them. And interesting thing, the car's braking really softly. So ask yourself, imagine after this talk there's a lot of autonomous cars out there. Would you use it for your way home or not? Are there people that have changed their minds? Maybe. What I want to tell or show with that, first thing is, yeah, we will have accidents with autonomous cars even in the future, and maybe, and that's a big debate about ethics and morals and questions how you need to program them, moral dilemma. We will have cars that make mistakes, and maybe we will buy autonomous cars like we buy medicine today, and there's a sheet of paper there, and it says in 1 of 10 million cases this car kills the driver. Would you use it or not? But I don't know. But what we see, there's the development ongoing, and the interesting thing is, if we talk about the future, is this the future of the German car industry, autonomous Daimler? And I say no, because 50% of cars lives in mega cities, and everyone who has been in mega cities knows that a car is not a good option. There's cities in London, for instance, you pay a city mount. If you're in Beijing or Shanghai, the license plate costs more than the car itself. So the world doesn't want to have cars. So what does Germany do? Yeah.
That's a thing for me that's really grotesque,
because people don't really believe in the change of the world. There's really great examples in the past. I want to mention that briefly. What has been the main export item of the US in the 19th century? Please say something. Cotton? Whiskey, yeah. No, it was natural ice. You can read that. Cut of the cold lakes in Boston. Natural ice has been exported towards India, for instance. So it was a really huge export industry until the fridge appeared. And if you see this in detail, even when the fridge was there, the natural ice industry will say, no, that's not happening. We just continue. 10 years later, the industry did not exist anymore. So, with other words, mistrust such people if it's about progress, and they don't know where the future is heading. Let's say it with John Maynard Keynes. The biggest problem is not to let people accept new ideas, but to let them forget the old ones. And what I really find frustrating in Germany, we have areas where we're really great, but we're kind of saturated and snobbish when it's about complete branches of industry have not get the message that something is changing. And now let's come to the artificial intelligence, machine learning. We all read about it's great, AlphaGo beats LazyDoll while playing Go, and Go is a really difficult game. Raise your hand if you play Go. The interesting thing is, in the last year, there has been AlphaGo 0. The artificial intelligence is able to do that. She can only play Go, but what means artificial intelligence there? What separates it from us? And the interesting thing is, if you have children or remember your own childhood, then you see what we all are doing. We are not stupid. What does a child do? A child sits there and with papa or mama and shows the cat and says, this is a cat, this is a dog. And we practice that. So we try to categorize pictures and words. So we all learned, and that's the learning process, what the machine has to do itself. But we humans are extremely good at that. We don't really recognize that we do that. Let's see this example. This is our dog Shanti. Everyone is calling him Boo Boo, an Australian Shepherd. And just imagine you're a highly intelligent machine, and you want to find Boo Boo, and that's not trivial. And if you see this, it's both are Shanti. It's all Shanti. But oh my God! And there on the right, it's Shanti, and this is Anouk, and this is Kira. So do you see something? For a computer, that's really incredible hard for a computer to say this is Shanti. For us, it's not. Why? Because we are specialized in that. We can something machines couldn't do for a long time. We can differentiate, and we can create categories. Although things in the world are different, if I ask anyone in the room, please, here are handwritten numbers, please circle the 3s, every one of us can do that. And we can do that, and for artificial intelligence, this was a real problem, until someone had the idea, okay, let's use what we have. Namely the brain, or let's try to model a brain. This is my brain. You can recognize this on the nose. Whenever I show this picture, the good information is there's a brain. That's not a given for people working for the German television. So what are we doing? We model a brain, a neural network with neurons. There's input, there's a function, a function with a bit threshold, and then depending on the input or not, it creates an output or not, and you put this into a network, and you put in data in the beginning, similar like the picture for the children, and the system is learning using data. This is trivial, but the important point is using this enormous computing power we have today, and we're doing it through the technological change. We have a lot of power, and I want to test that with you. And a simple example, I have a friend, he's working in London with Google DeepMind. He gave me some examples. It's about music, classical piano music from the Romantic. And question for you is Turing test. I'm playing some music, and you need to decide, is this a human who has composed that and playing, or is that a machine that has composed it and plays it? Okay, you're ready? Human or machine? Example number 1.
Okay.
Okay. Who among you, this is obviously a human? Raise your hands. Who says machine?
Okay.
I'm saying nothing. All right. Just keep it in mind. I'm showing you the second example. Who thinks this is a man, a human? Who says machine? You say machine?
Das waren meine beiden Töchter.
Those two were my daughters.
Aber das erste war eine Maschine.
But the first one was a machine.
Drittes Beispiel.
Example number 3.
Wer von euch sagt Mensch?
Who thinks this was composed by a human?
Maschine?
Who says machine?
Wer ist unsicher?
Who's unsure?
Got it.
Got it.
Das Spannende ist, wir können es nicht mehr unterscheiden.
The exciting thing is we cannot distinguish this anymore. And this does not only count for classical music, but also for language. And I'm going to show you right now, because this is super exciting, in the learning process for a neural network, how it learns to speak. Because this has nothing to do with the awesome computer language of the recently dead Stephen Hawking, but language itself means if we humans talk, we breathe, we swallow, and you hear something that is it sounds like baby speak, but it's like how a neural network learns to breathe.
Was man hört ist,
what you hear is
das klingt so irgendwie.
it sounds human somehow, and it's going to be hard to distinguish language in this type of thing. So now imagine if you're talking about artificial intelligence, you have that in your pant pocket as well. Like, for example, you can talk to your phone. How old was Ludwig van Beethoven?
Ludwig van Beethoven wurde 56 Jahre alt.
56 years. I'm going to turn 59 soon. Where was he born?
Wurde in Bonn geboren.
He was born in Bonn. I can talk to this machine. Did you notice something? How was my second question? Where was he born? Okay? These systems understand an implicit context, which is super exciting, because I got to know the boss of Google in Zurich, and so now you can maybe think of what will happen. Now, if you're calling in 4 years a hotline, then you will realize there's a super eloquent lady that is extremely competent, and you're unsure, is this a human or is it a machine? So this means we are arriving in a world where the only difference maybe is she is so fast, she has to be a machine, because humans can't do that. And if you try these things, then you realize that this is estranging. So in the last few lessons in Bangalore, I was talking to a business expert and system, and I was talking to the system, and if it has been behind a curtain, I would have thought, this is a very competent human. So if you have friends who are working in a telephone hotline, tell them this is not a good long-term job. What's also happening, and this is even more interesting, is in neural networks we talk about structures where we create the structure, but it's in the end it's a black box. This means we put in data. By the way, also reversal of the flow from programming. So now the data programs the network, but no one knows what is happening in the cells in between. There's a few examples. If you have a neural network that identify people, for example, so like imagine there's a camera and they just identify if is this a man or a human or not, and there's a few cells that light up if they see cloth that has folds. And just look at your neighbor, for example, like a machine has this category for detecting humans. So you see like there's something changes, but you don't understand how it works. And many people are working on this. Like Google, for example, they're working on the question, how does a neural network distinguish between a Labrador and a cat? And how are the layers between that? How do the layers between that look? Like this is something called explainable artificial networks, so something where we can understand the causality, because this is important because these technologies in many areas are are using the black box, so we use them without knowing how it actually works. There are algorithmic banks who use that to access or deny credit, but no one can answer the question, why didn't I get the credit? The only answer is because the algorithm has decided that. And if we think about a system of law, we're still the sons and daughters of enlightenment, where there's a base on causality. If someone has been arrested, we want to know why. And we don't want in the future that an algorithm will tell us if we are guilty or not, and we don't know why. If we allow for that, then we are arriving in a weird new world of an oracle, and I don't think we should allow that. So if you think about the history of the Oracle of Delphi, that the snake Python the head was removed and the blood flowed to this place, and this is where this was used as a basis of a prediction. And now if you think Python, Oracle, Delphi, okay. But we're still continuing industriously by taking these technologies that we don't really understand, for example, to recognize faces and profiles. And these technologies show us that from an economical perspective, it might make sense to move fast. Because from an economical perspective, you say, okay, the systems have a failure rate that is lower than others. But from a democratic perspective, we want to have systems that are able to be understandable. And this is breathtaking. Like, imagine, we're in Berlin, like 30 years ago. Imagine telling the Stasi people are actually installing microphones and cameras in their homes. And we actually allow this. How can it be that we allow this? It might be exciting, but I'm not stooping. I'm actually looking like what patents are created by Amazon, for example. Everyone can look at that. One or more sniffer algorithms are trying in your home what is the content and the way you articulate that content of your speech. There's others. There's a patent about habit of the individual, predicted mischief. Mischief, like maybe your family has a stress, and do you really want Amazon to know that your marital troubles? This might be nice from an economical perspective, but especially here, I think it's high time to really think about these things. And that's not about only Amazon, this also counts for Facebook, of course. And we've all seen that it's an absolute farce how Facebook treats our private data. And ever since Cambridge Analytica, we've seen that the usage of this data was not only used to optimize, like Zuckerberg says, of the advertising experience, but also it is being passed on, because Cambridge Analytica shows us the potential of these social networks, which might be legitimate in many uses. These social networks are being able to use to manipulate democratic elections. And it's shameful that our politicians are not aggressive enough on this. I looked at the 2 congressional hearings regarding Zuckerberg, and I was ashamed on the ignorance of politicians. Regardless of that, we have to ask ourselves at some point, all this technology is nice in a democracy, but democracy is not the default recipe of all nations. There's many nations who are not as democratic as us. So maybe the internet will be centered a little bit, or maybe a little bit too much. Imagine this technology in the hands of others, and then you realize that we have reached a phase where we really have to think very hard and discuss about this more than we do right now. But we're talking about digital culture, and we forget that the exciting thing about this, that it is usually these areas where different disciplines are merging into each other. This is where it gets most exciting. Take, for example, books. Imagine, I'm telling you a quick story, the book of the future. The book of the future will be a reader, most likely, because paper books are not very practical. The story I'm telling you now is very valid because I can actually support it with details. So the book of the future, you're reading it on the reader, and the reader has a camera. Like a laptop. In Sweden, near Stockholm, I was in a science institute that are doing this research that is using eye tracking, which can track the movement of your eye, and those new readers that will come up, they will automatically turn the page once they reach the bottom of the page, which is super. But something else is happening as well. You see what the person is actually looking at. So I'm actually prognosticating that internet advertising will only be paid for if it's actually being seen by the user. There's another aspect that's a bit weird. As a kid, I had to read Effi Briest in school, German book. If I have a reader, the teacher can actually see exactly who did read this book and who didn't. So the book is actually tattling on its reader. So what are the advantages of this? You have a monitoring of the reader. This is also happening today already. In this science institute, you have a camera that doesn't only take the eye tracking, but also the pupil dilation, which is a reflex that we have, that if something is exciting, our pupils dilate, which we can take as a measure for emotionality. So you can imagine this book will be optimized. Why? Because if in chapter 3 people jump off all the time, then the chapter will be reworked and the book will be more exciting. And you read it and it's more exciting. And you read it and then suddenly your friends and your street is taking place in the book. Of course, because personalized information is going deep, and you're surprised because you're reading this book, and it was your birthday yesterday, and also the protagonist had their birthday as well. And now 2 weeks ago you had influenza, and the protagonist is saying like, get well soon, and you read this book and you realize you're seeing patterns. Here, seeds for breakfast. You didn't have them, and you had them, and the protagonist also has them. So you're reading this exciting book, and then in chapter 23 your phone rings and the book is calling you. And you read the book and you are completely fulfilled with this. And in chapter 37 your phone is ringing again and it's still your book. And the book says, hello. We have to tell you, your data, we recommend, based on your data, go to a neurologist. We created an appointment for you, and you look into your calendar, and there's an appointment made, and the neurologist tells you that, first of all, this is not a normal book, like you would know it. This is a diagnostic tool created by a pharma company or a software company, and is used to check your reactions and the micro rhythms of reading and the sounds that you make and the movements that you make, because it also looks at your face to diagnose illnesses. And in this case, it's good that you're here because we have found first indicators of Parkinson's in you. This, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, is not science fiction. This is what is being started with a Parkinson's Voice initiative, only based on sounds, language, and you can actually say whether a person is actually sick of Parkinson or not.
And if we not only look at the software but on the hardware, and when look at chemistry, we think at large things, but I have a friend, she's working in Cambridge at the Department of Biochemistry, and they do pico droplet tests, and very, very tiny droplets. And if you read, sensors are as small as chips, and they can do chemistry with that. They can keep separate droplets, and with the software they can evaluate it based on different things. So we're breaking open a new door where the chemistry is revolutionized, and in different areas this happens, and this is microstructures, and it's same grammar, and there's a grammar of microelectronics, and within shortest time you can scan enormous amount of things. The first successes in the beginning of the year, one was searching for some kind of substance against malaria, and one found something in toothpaste. And it's really recent, 29th of March, planning chemical signatures with deep neural networks and some symbolic AI. Today we start to combine. Today we are fast with that, so the chemist has not to do this by hand. So we will experience a change there in the way we do chemistry and the way we do medicine. We need to talk about when and until which depth machines are allowed to penetrate us, and we need to talk about what we do with the tons of data we gather. And it's really interesting and exciting because these both areas are way more merged than you might imagine, and you need to have a look at the data of Google and Amazon in the medical area. In Stanford is being worked on interesting things, and the investors are from the IT. I've been there last year, and they're working on the methods where they try to revert Alzheimer's disease, because with the technology you can synthesize proteins in the bloodstream, and if you give that to Alzheimer's disease infected mice, they get better. So maybe in the next years, in the coming years, there will be a screening for every one of us, and they will just recognize that the DNA age and try everything. So not only autonomous vehicles. So I did this test. So my real age is 58, but my DNA age is 54. So wow. Since I'm a physicist, I read the small print, and so the deviation is big. But we come in an age where insurance companies are using this data to decide, do I take this client or not? And this longing for data is enormous. We are talking about artificial intelligence, not about silicon thingies, but a change of us, of ourselves, of our species. And I'm coming towards the finish, but we start to think about this for a moment. It's time about think about what is innovation. What are we doing? What are we doing? Innovation is, let me provocate it a bit. It's what a small white minority does for another small white rich minority. So some examples. Neo. It's a pot where you can put muesli inside, and then on your smartphone you can check how full it is and how much calories are in there. Neuma is a watch with a sensor which tells you if you're stressed or not. I mean, what? Most of the time, watches cause stress for me. Or like a friend in Kenya said to me, you have the watches, we have the time. So if we talk about that, we need to talk about people. We talk way too little about these. We talk way too little about 20% of the inhabitants of mega cities. They can't order at Amazon because they don't have an address or internet or whatever. They don't even have a toilet or clean water. So we're talking about 2018, where on the one side we have 19 filed patents for changing images on smartphones, and we should ask ourselves, what are we doing for these people? Artificial intelligence and fast progress shows that we are living in a world, and it's the first generation that can do that, change and shape the present and the world, and never before a generation existed that could do that, and this is enormous potential we all have, and this should lead to a different responsibility and different priorities. And it's not about the poor people far, far away, but it's also about we need to think about who's the winners and who's the losers here. And what we all experience right now is that democracies are endangered and threatened, and there's a lot of people who are not knowing what's their place in our future. And on our way towards that, very fast a system can collapse, and that's a thing what we are experiencing right now, not only in Europe but also in the US. And if Trump is having a second term, I doubt that the US is still a democratic country, and other key countries also experience this kind of change, and we should think on our way towards that. We need to think about what does this technical advance mean for us, and what does this mean for the society, and we need to be sensitive towards that, and we need to have scientists talking about and discussing about that. And my hope is that this great digital new world is providing new chances. I grew up in India, and back then communication with the world outside was really, really expensive. And it's the first time in history that communication became symmetric. So this means if I have an internet access in Bombay, Bombay or in Berlin, I have access to the same information. That's never been this way before in the history of mankind. We have the possibility to educate people that are far, far away from. We have the potential to use that for our society, and I think that's the duty we have for our society. I'm coming to my end now, and this is the advertisement. I'm skipping that. And what I want to say is what we need is an attitude. And this attitude does not mean yes or no, but this attitude means, and public Picasso said this very nicely,
what a man can just let go, even though he is full of fear. And we experience this, like the fear of losing your workplace, fear of losing your friends, fear of losing your communications, and then also the experience the opening of new possibilities and the being held in these new possibilities. And this is the thing that we need in our new generation, like the being not afraid of letting go and experience new chances that are not only resulting from new economic categories, but chances that lead to a world that has advancements. And not only these advancements, these innovations are not only innovations for a tiny minority, but an innovation that will make us all winners. Thank you very much.